And I always describe public voice as beyond the ballot box, or democracy between elections, so that everybody is really familiar with public voice when it comes to putting a ballot in a box. But then what happens, either your ballot didn't mean somebody got elected, or your person got elected, but how do you influence what they do in between elections? And so I always think about the need to build capacity with the public service, because it's their job to be able to develop the policy and take the direction that the politicians provide in order to do something. So when I think about building capacity, I think about helping public service leaders engage their constituencies and use the information that they provide in an effective way.
And so my work is the other side of the coin, which is making sure that helping ensure that those participating in that public dialogue are providing effective information and effective inputs to that public policy process, so that it becomes more than just opinion, and it is informed, and the communication is executed responsibly, so that the young people I work with understand that when they express their opinion, not only will it matter, but because it matters, you need to make sure that your opinion is an educated one, and that you express it responsibly and in a solution-oriented way, rather than, complaint, because public voice isn't about complaint. It's about moving to constructive engagement and problem solving.
How do you do that with your students?
With the students?
Yeah.
It's not easy. I mean, we build small. We build within the school and develop a process of dialogue within the school around different issues. So the first place they try to have an impact is sort of within the school and on what happens in the school, and then taking them out beyond the school. But educating them before they get to a particular forum, educating them and working with them about the issues and why do they care, because I try to only engage students in the issues in which they care about, because of course there's a lot of stuff that they don't care about, and so there's not much point. So find out what they care about, educate them around those issues, and then find places for them to participate, and then try to, and this is the part where it's out of our control, but try to help them succeed so that they do feel there has been an impact or they have been heard. And sometimes that's a very manufactured process, like bringing back decision makers into the school and having them sort of complete the circle with the students.
That's a really big reason why people are so disillusioned, I think, with participation generally, and there's a lot of trust lost in government, because they find that citizens or whoever, constituents, public, whatever you want to call them, provide all this feedback, and then they don't see it influencing anything. Right. So a big part from working with the public sector leaders is showing and sort of training or raising awareness that you don't sort of talk to the public for the sake of it. Right. You talk to a public because you are at a certain stage in a certain decision-making process that's clearly laid out over time, where you need some advice in order to understand the consequences of some of the decisions you're making. And I think there have been too many times where consultation and engagement exercises have happened where you just sort of ask people for their opinion and they don't see it tracing back to anything. Right. And a huge task for training leaders or leaders in the public services to say, what decision are you going to make? Who are you going to talk to before you make it? And then show them. You don't have to do everything that people tell you, but you do have to explain what you've done with it. This is what I've heard you say. This is how we're responding, or we're not responding because of these other factors. And sort of laying out and building trust through that kind of transparency is a really big deal. And I can see why, it'd be just as relevant for students as well. One of the biggest challenges I have is trying to figure out how to sort of manage the ego in all of it. So a lot of people are really good at what they do because they really take a lot of pride in the fact that they're the only one, or they're the one that's the best at it. And it's really hard to offload or share ownership of your idea with others. Like some people, only reason they get out of bed in the morning is because it's, and in many cases there are certain professions that are particularly susceptible to this. You might have a super hotshot architect or urban planner or an engineer who really believes that their idea is the big idea. And when you're working in a public environment, your idea is only as big as your ability to sort of explain it and inspire others. And you also have to leave room for other people to understand and add to it. And if you have too much ownership over it, then you start sort of manipulating the process, and then people can smell it before they even hear you speak that you're not really that interested in what they have to say. So then why bother talking?
Right, but that's the same part of the problem too, because that's what happens when I'm working with the students, is to try to show them that they do have a good idea, and then to have it forward, and then they do want to trace that idea, and that idea isn't necessarily as good as they think it is, and nor can it necessarily hit the ground running. So the practical piece of actually making public participation sing on the ground is really difficult from both ends, and then it's creating the systems to support it, because it's interesting. I think this is the first time you and I are talking about this actual problem, and it would be an interesting conversation to continue, right? So what gaps do you find in feeding into the public service, and then what gaps do I find when I'm trying to get the young people to participate and design whatever we can to close some of those gaps?
It's almost like you have to run like a mini university curriculum in a 2-hour meeting with some newsletters leading up to it, and maybe some kind of blog or some kind of internet where people can access the information if they choose to, because it's a really there's a lot of people who write about your opinion is only as strong as your ability to understand the consequences of that opinion, and then you keep the same opinion. So you have to both. I think constituents like your students would need to be informed about, and it's hard. I've done a lot of consultation with young people, and so you can't devalue an opinion for the sake of it because somebody doesn't know better. But then it becomes the responsibility of others participating in the process to do that sort of two-way and mutually respectful education. So you can say, okay, that's your opinion. This is how it influences me. This is how I'm thinking it from a policy development perspective, and this is how it will influence you. And unless you have the patience for that exchange, and that you actually like people and think they have some value and you're interested in learning, then the process breaks down. It's quite a certain personality set to be able to. And I think you were saying before, you have to train people to do it. So.
Yeah,
I
think
totally
you do have
agree.
To train people, and then you have to train the other side to learn, and also the kids participating to learn from each other and learn from the process and learn from the other ideas that are swinging around. Because that's one of the barriers I find too for them. What works is when you get people participating from all walks of life and with different sets of opinions, because too often in that consultation process, kids go in and they feel devalued because they're not the inner city youth perhaps that was being consulted with at the city. They're actually coming in with another point of view, and then what do they do with that point of view? And they can sometimes feel illegitimate because they don't think they're part of the right demographic, and yet the policy that's made will have an impact on them too.
Absolutely. And then it becomes the policy maker's responsibility to be able to identify all of the different interests and all of the different lenses through which you can see a problem or an issue, and to engage that full suite of perspectives, because without that, again, somebody's making a decision on somebody else's behalf without knowing any better about what the consequences might be.
Right.
So, yeah, that's a big deal.